After I finished all of Thomas Pynchon's novels, I had a hard time finding something else to love. Suddenly, everything felt not brave enough, not creative enough. Literary books, it didn't seem like enough happened. Genre books, the language wasn't interesting to me anymore. So what I'm going to do today is share 3 books that if you've read everything Thomas Pynchon has ever written and you're looking for what's next, you might want to check out. Now, the first book, and the most obvious book, is Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. A lot of the language and themes that Heller uses in this book are really similar to the things that Thomas Pynchon talks about. They both have the mix of highbrow comedy and overwhelming tragedy. They both use those zany character names, and they both fundamentally are about the structures that surround us and what happens when an ordinary person looks around and sees himself in an insane situation. In this book, that ordinary person is Yossarian. He's a bomber pilot in World War II, and he doesn't understand. He doesn't want to be in the war. He doesn't know these people. Why are they trying to kill him? Why is he being forced to fight in this war? Everything that happens to him only seems to happen so that something else can happen, and he doesn't understand what the end point is or the reason or the purpose behind it all. For instance, the beginning of chapter 22, that was the mission on which Yossarian lost his nerve. Yossarian lost his nerve on the mission to Avignon because Snowden lost his guts, and Snowden lost his guts because the pilot that day was Hoople, who was only 15 years old, and their co-pilot was Dobbs, who was even worse and who wanted Yossarian to join him in a plot to murder Colonel Cathcart. Hoople was a good pilot, Yossarian knew, but he was only a kid, and Dobbs had no confidence in him either, and wrested the controls away without warning after they had dropped their bombs going berserk in midair, and tipping the plane over into that heart-stopping, ear-splitting, indescribably petrifying fatal dive that tore Yossarian's earphones free from their connection and hung him helplessly to the roof of the nose by the top of his head. So there's an energy to the writing that's really similar to what you might feel in some of Thomas Pynchon's books. Unfortunately, if you've really read everything Thomas Pynchon has ever written, my guess is you've already read Catch-22. And so it's not really that helpful a suggestion. So I had to dig a little bit deeper. And the next book I thought about recommending was You Bright and Risen Angels by William T. Vollmann. What is You Bright and Risen Angels about? Man, I'm not quite sure. It's about a person who is involved in a conflict between humans and bugs, except some of the characters very much seem like they might be plants. And the story is told in this fractured way that is partially a history of electricity, partially a life history of these characters. It bounces back and forth in time, flashing forward to reveal events that will happen later on in this book or in a second book which Vollmann just never wrote or maybe even never planned to write. Now, it sounds like I don't like this book. I loved this book. It was so fun to read. One thing that does make it so special is Vollmann's refusal to pick any one perspective. Sometimes he's writing from a character's perspective. Sometimes he's another person in the narrative, but you're not even sure who all the time. And in this book, sometimes he breaks through as himself, as the author. For instance, when he crouched there in the sandy cave, the chilly water running over his body, and he shivered and looked around to see all the globes rolling in on him, he also saw the silhouette of an individual, neither tall nor short, not fat and not thin, that is to say quite average in general shape, suspiciously so, who was wearing big boots and a cowboy hat and cracked a whip, and the blue globes moved in time to the whip beats, dancing and rolling around Sammy, now faster, now slower, in perfect, intelligent obedience to the whip. Now, who could that be, I suggest? But Big George. And who could he be but the pure electrical consciousness itself, insinuating itself everywhere, drifting in and out of all stories and machines? It's almost like Vollmann is surprised to meet some of these people along the way. And too, like Yossarian in Catch-22, realize that there is a structure that we cannot see, a matrix living over our heads. And the work of figuring out what it is and how it's informing our cognitive map is the work of our lives. So would I recommend this book? I don't know you. I actually really liked it. One reason why I wouldn't put it at the top of this list is it's not really that representative to me of the rest of where Vollmann went with his career. He is famous and brilliant at telling stories from American history, at revealing the lives of people on the fringes of society. The language in this book, that sort of madcap back and forth, is not that present all the time in most of the rest of his work. This is a great book to read after you read Thomas Pynchon. It's not necessarily that great an introduction, in my opinion, to William Vollmann. Which leads me to this book, Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed. This book is also about a conspiracy, kind of. It's about a pandemic that is sweeping its way out of Black culture and into white culture. The only side effect of this pandemic is that it makes white people learn how to dance. For some reason, some people are very threatened by this. And conflict, hilarity, crime, all the things that you might find in a Thomas Pynchon novel, they all happen here as well. The two things that I love most about Mumbo Jumbo, first of all, it's the imagination. Reed has this amazing ability to take little bits of history and culture and then make cocktails out of them that you would just never expect. The second thing I love, maybe even more, is just the language. This is a book that you will end up reading out loud to yourself because the language is just so interesting. I'm just going to start reading at the very, very beginning here. A true sport, the mayor of New Orleans. Spiffy in his patent leather brown and white shoes, his plaid suit, the Rudolph Valentino parted down the middle hairstyle, sits in his office. Sprawled upon his knees is Zuzu, local do-wackadoo and boo-doo-dee-o-doo fizz-zig. A slatternly floozy, her green sequin dress quivers. Work has kept your honor late. The mayor passes the flask of bootleg gin to Zuzu. She takes a sip and continues to sprawl and behave skittishly. She's inhaling from a Chesterfield cigarette in a shameless, brazen fashion. The telephone rings. The mayor removes his hand and picks up the receiver. He recognizes at once the voice of his poker partner on the phone. Hurry! You better get down here quick. What once was dormant is now a creeping thing. I mean, I'll stop there, but you can see, it's almost like an accent pops into your head as you're reading this book. It is the voice of the author and the voice of this story, which is one that sprawls throughout American history and will put a smile on your face, but will also make you think, which is the thing that I liked so much about Thomas Pynchon, and it's the thing that I liked about Ishmael Reed, Mumbo Jumbo, and all the books that I talked about in this video. And I am going to tag this video with a trailer for my own novel, Chatterhat. If you like the Inherent Vice specifically, it has a little bit of that sort of like slacker stoner noir energy. If you've seen the movie Under the Silver Lake, it has a little bit of that energy as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, check it out.
His name is Bob, and he delivers the milk. He doesn't need the money, it's just something to do. One night, Bob hears a story about a mass shooting and a girl too good to be true. A story he can't let go. Next thing you know, Bob's doing a deep dive into the suburban weird. Along the way, he might encounter a cat-munching goat monster, a possibly mythical criminal mastermind, a half-faced man who's a whole lot of trouble, some curious neighbors, a masked typist, and the clues to a mystery Bob may lack the imagination to define, the courage to pursue, and the acuity to solve, assuming a solution exists. Have fun, Bob. Don't drop the milk.